Hello everyone, welcome to ASAT Central's webinar on Exponential, Agritech and Terraforming, presented by Alternative Universal Designs for Cities, or also called as Audacity. First, I would like to invite Anthony Chong from ASAT Central to say a few words.
Hi, morning everyone. Very excited by this because we actually went out to Audacity a couple of weeks back before this thing that stay at home. We were totally blown away by what they mean by organized chaos. It's almost a notch away from, total unstructured where things happen for creative reasons. People mingle from the food to the 3D printing to the rest of the makerspace. And the latest thing they are almost touching upon is the water and the aqua aspect. Yeah, I think it's by Q that Jeremy is drinking water, I think. Yeah, but anyway, very exciting stuff. It's a pity that we cannot go down there as what we wanted to do, because I think this webinar, no matter how inspiring it is, the corporate video, no matter how creatively it's done in-house, it's not going to do anyone the full justification of visiting them. So when this is over, my colleague Jackson and Susan, I think we'll be looking into how we can organize to bring everyone there to feel for yourself. We had the most interesting meal when we were there, having some of the alternative proteins. I will let Jaden and friends talk about it later on. We talk about protein, we talk about plant-based, food-based, cell-based, but to have it, to savor it, and to really sense it, I think that is something else that is totally amazing. I think this is part and parcel of their journey. We now pass it on to them to start. Without further ado, thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. So next, let us watch a short video clip about Audacity.
What if we reimagined the future of food? A future where we grow, process, and consume food optimally and sustainably. Slice, a farm-to-fork robo-cafe, is an experimental platform where innovators can test-bed ideas surrounding the future of food and agriculture before integrating them into the value chain.
Wow, that looks interesting. Let us now welcome Jeremy Sim, the community organizer of Audacity and the creative director of Mistletoe, to share with us about Audacity. Jeremy?
Hello, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm one of the many community organizers that play out of Audacity. I would like to do a kind of short presentation with you guys. So I'm going to put up a share screen right now. Yeah, so today I'm joined by two of my good friends, Jaden and Xuan, to share something about what we're doing at Audacity. Hopefully, you'll be the first of a series of engagements and collaborations between the Audacity community and the more practical-minded of the A-Star community. So look forward to building this relationship together. Yeah. So Audacity actually stands for the Alternative Universal Designs of a city. And our philosophy is to build a play-based startup capital for the world's grand challenges right here in Singapore. Oh, give me a second. I just need to put something up. Oh. Okay. Yeah, so technology, social, and environment are creating once-in-a-century challenges and opportunities. This is a very famous visual taken from the year 1900. It's a snapshot of Fifth Avenue in New York City. And here you have a picture full of horse carriages, right? And right in the middle, there's one solitary car. It's circled. And forward just a short 13 years later, it's the same street with nothing but cars, right? So we believe that the world is at a similar transition point. The next 10 to 20 years will be such a radical transformation that, if you have kids today, by the time they finish university, you can tell them about the year in 2021, and you would have seemed like a very, very distant past. And another factor that's really blowing up has been the environment. So I lived in Berlin for a number of years. I spent 20 years in the US and Europe before I came back to Singapore in 2017. And I experienced the refugee crisis in Europe that came out of, that started with Syria. It was triggered by a series of droughts, according to many analysts, right? And it triggered 1 million refugees coming into Europe, 20 million worldwide. That created many problems, including the rise of the far right, Brexit, a lot of social unrest, governments were toppled. And that is with just a relatively small number of refugees on the move. So climate change projections are for a demographic shift that's anywhere between 10 to 100 times that, of course, but spread out over a longer period of time. So since I'm talking to a lot of scientists, I decided to put together a chart or basically a listing of some of the more recent data points that came out over the past 12 to 18 months. This is the trajectory where we're headed for between now and the year 2070, right? So the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is kind of like the terrestrial counterpart to NASA, reported that the global sea levels are 8.76 centimeters higher than in 1993. This is a rise over 26 years, which is not really that long. I think my friends Xuan and Jaden are 26. That's about how old they are. The global population today is at 7.7 billion. The latest analysis shows that COVID has not slowed down our climate change trajectory at all. Right, this is the latest from the UN reports. 2030 is where we try to build our playground. So we live in the current period, but we try to build a simulated environment at Audacity. We built a test bed that kind of simulates how the 2030s could be like. Right, because we think that the 2030s is a very important inflection point for the world. We could go one of many ways. The Singapore Meteorological Service last year came out with a projection saying that somewhere between the year 2045 and the year 2065, we would have our first 40-degree day, right? And I think the report said there's actually no avoiding it. The latest it could happen is 2065. The earliest was 2045. It didn't sound very optimistic of completely avoiding it altogether. And today is a pretty bright day. It's like it says 32 degrees on my climate notice. 32 degrees and 40 degrees is a big difference. I've experienced 40 degrees in the Middle East. It is very, very painful. Yeah, much more than it is today. 2050, according to the Crowther Lab, at ETH Zurich, which has been doing a lot of work with in Singapore, as you guys may know. They project a huge shift in climate globally. Many cities will become warmer than they currently are. For example, London is projected to have the same temperature as Barcelona today. Under those conditions, there are a lot of analysis saying that climate conflicts may become very common at that point. And maybe most alarming is an article published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Some of you will know that it is one of the oldest scientific publications in the US, very respectable. And the report basically says that regions now home to 40% of the world population will become too hot to live in. These people will have to move. This is a huge migration on an unprecedented scale, right? So as you can see, there are a lot of interesting challenges for the future generations, and maybe even for us in our lifetime. Shortage of resources, inequalities, shortage of community bonds, shortage of food and water, a shortage of quality education, and shortage of healthcare. So what is Audacity? Audacity is a JTC and Mistletoe collaboration. Most of you will know JTC, but let's run through it anyway. So JTC is Singapore's largest industrial landlord. They are responsible for infrastructure to support and catalyze industry growth. JTC and Mistletoe, we signed an MOU about just over 2 years ago to jointly create a humanity-centric prototype city in Jurong Innovation District. And we were very pleased that they agreed that the focus could be on the world's grand challenges. As a development, the Jurong Innovation District is JTC's largest development project in recent decades. As a comparison, it's about more than double the size of One North. Right? Mistletoe is a little bit. Mistletoe probably needs a bit more introduction. It's a social impact collective. It's founded in 2013, and the global HQ was moved to Singapore in 2018. It has a rather large portfolio, over 200 investments globally, totaling $500 million in startups such as Astroscale, which is a space startup, Garena, which is a gaming startup, Lifeline, Nordic Ventures, Ninja Card, India Food Tech, Zipline, Africa originated logistics, and Zoox, which is a self-driving car in the Silicon Valley. It's founded by Taizo-san, who's known by some as the youngest brother of the founder of SoftBank. And his earlier startup success includes Gumho, which was at one point the most successful game publisher in Japan and the world, and Supercell, which had a similar status in Europe. And his partner in crime in Singapore is Mr. Atsushi Taira. Atsushi worked for SoftBank for many years, and together with Taizo, they moved to Singapore about 3 years ago. So Audacity is basically the love child between JTC and Mistletoe. This is just some of the projects that Mistletoe was involved in: Zipline, Astroscale, Ninja Card, Zoox. It's got a reasonable track record in the impact venture space. This is one of the favorite startups. So it was a pitch, and it wasn't a standard pitch the way most of us understand standard pitches, because it was a one-page drawing, and on this basis, Mistletoe invested $500,000 as kind of like an angel investor. It's done very well. It's our, I think it became a unicorn last year. Temasek, Walmart, I think Andreessen invested subsequently. And they've done very well. They've become the largest medical delivery network in Africa. And then they've moved on to the US, where they are making a mark there. I'm talking about a medical drone delivery by air. Yeah. So now let's turn the focus on the Audacity, right? So what is Audacity? This is a question that we get asked a lot. We think of ourselves as a playground for innovators, right? We also think of ourselves as a movement for people who are interested to reimagine the concept of cities from a blank slate, right? So we tend to be quite an imaginative bunch who are interested to create spaces that we want to live in that may look quite different from the world today. And is relevant to a very uniquely humanity-centric vision, right? So currently we signed the MOU just over 2 years ago. We are in the operational phase for about 20 months now. I think since September 2019, so 21 months now. We have currently 8 working groups from farm to fork, microfactory, which is kind of decentralized advanced manufacturing. Seed Project 3 is with the Energy Research Institute at NTU. It's basically looking to create a modular kit for energy, water, and shelter to kind of like a civilization starter kit. Seed Project 4 has been renamed V+. It's an infrastructure project. Seed Project 5 is about human flourishing, human capital. Seed Project 6 is remote robotics. Seed Project 7 has a lot of artists, and Seed Project 8 is climate adaptive. So later I'll be joined by 2 of my friends, Jaden, who is working on a startup that came out of Seed Project 1, and Xuan who's hoping to create a startup out of Seed Project 8. Right. So each Seed Project could conceivably end up creating multiple startups. So we try to take an approach, a community approach. We have also been known as a community center for startups. We try to emphasize diversity and cross-pollinate ideas. And that's why we tend to be quite unstructured, right? We actually avoid structure as much as possible because Audacity's focus is not on growing Audacity as a business. Audacity's focus is to create room and space for ideas to emerge that could eventually become businesses, right? So we are almost like pre-order. We are pre-order. And another thinking that we had is the innovative technology that we test and develop in a developed market like Singapore can eventually move to the rest of Southeast Asia or India or Africa, and then kind of get entrenched there, and then maybe circle back somehow in a disruptive form. Parallels could be, for example, the payments landscape in China, how they leapfrog an entire generation of payments, or mobile infrastructure in India, or even the example of Zipline, right? It started off gaining its traction in Africa. It worked there, and then with the proof of concept, it moved back into the US where it got a lot of supporters. Yeah, so since we've been around for just under 2 years, last year we ran a program, Moonshot Permacolony. We wanted to look for startups that would come into Audacity and help us build this new world. And these were some of the themes that we shared with the startups who were interested. I think we worked with Enterprise Singapore for that. And together we looked at a lot of startups and we came up with a final call group. And the themes include startups that could help build a world where the members are part of a food secure community that is resilient, autonomous, and harmonious. A world where its members have autonomy over living spaces and they can coexist symbiotically with their environment. A world where members are mindful of their resource needs and collectively aim towards being generative rather than extractive. A world where members are empowered through the DIY culture to create items that they need. A world where members leverage on technology to perform tasks that were previously unimaginable and enjoy greater time freedom. And lastly, a world where its members flourish continually and experience high levels of happiness, purpose, and life satisfaction. Our thinking is that if you want to create a future world that is better, it just can't be better because it's more sustainable or you have a lower carbon footprint. If people are not happy to be there, it's not going to happen, right? So it's very important for us to create something that is measurably an improvement for life satisfaction. Yeah, so to summarize, we've thrown around a few kind of like names, but just to give you a recap. So Mistletoe is a venture ecosystem builder founded by Taizo-san. JTC is a Singapore industrial developer. Mistletoe and JTC together had kind of like a baby, which is called Audacity, to develop a playground and test bed for radical innovation. And this baby is running its own program called Permacolony, which is to look for startups to build a radically different future. So Permacolony, we put out the call and had the bootcamp towards the end of last year. And we have a small number of startups that will be lending to help us build up this Permacolony. Here's a sneak preview of the startups that we expect to lend this year. Yeah, actually a couple of them has already landed. One is Agritech. It's using CRISPR technology to grow rice in salt water. This is not just salt tolerant rice. It is rice that can actually grow in seawater, which in the Singapore waters is 32 mg per liter. Right. Second startup, Stuart, good friend of ours. He's already put in his first unit. It's from a startup called Alaska. They do indoor farming. They were on TED Talks. I think a couple of years ago, they were World Economic Forum, Food Tech Pioneer of the Year. They've got a lot of attraction in the Middle East and China, and they're moving part of the R&D to Singapore. The last I understand it. This is one of the newer startups. It's called Liquid Star. It's an energy microgrid. And of course, if you want to start a new colony, the toilet is the most important piece. So this is Change Water Labs. Is a startup that has a very interesting founder who was a McKinsey consultant with a background from MIT. And she was inspired by the toilets that NASA used for manned missions. And she went to try to build a very low-cost version of that for use here on Earth. And that would be our first toilet at the Permacolony. This is a Singapore startup called Craft Health. It came out of the NUS GRIP program. It was one of Mistletoe's first investments in Singapore. And we will be looking to them to help take care of the health of the permacolonists. And this is another one, Frontier Bio from the US, which is a bioprinting startup. Right, so this is just like a sneak preview of some of the startups that will be here. And we are here to look for more innovators and more startups. And I may turn to Jaden to articulate a bit more on the specific areas that we are looking for. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah, as what he has mentioned earlier, I'm one of the co-leads for Slice, which is looking at the future of food and agriculture. And that led me, in my past 2 years of exploration, it led me to come up with my startup that is focusing on soil. So let me introduce to you about my startup today, and hopefully also kind of share with you guys some of like the scientific inquiries that we might need help in, and see how maybe we can crowdsource some ideas as well. Yeah, so Soil Social is a startup that is looking into the regeneration of soil using microbiologically diverse compost technology. So what we do is actually to create a proper compost that is diverse with microbes for the use of home gardens and urban landscapes. We do support a circular economy by upcycling horticulture and landscaping waste, diverting them from the incinerator. And through this process, more carbon can be sequestered into the ground instead of being burnt back into the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. And then we can also mitigate climate change through making this compost and letting it sequester carbon in the soil. So our mission is to unlock new understanding of what makes good soil, because currently, as much as we know that locally, I think the idea of soil microbiology is still quite untapped, and also to create a thriving, diverse soil network starting from Singapore. So our vision is to create good soil everywhere and using our compost. And with this good soil, there's so much potential where we can grow nutritious food everywhere in the urban city. So to kind of put the context as to why we want to focus on soil, something that is so fundamental is because of the fact that currently the world's topsoil is actually projected to run out by the UN FAO in 2014 if status quo remains, which is us using industrialized agriculture practices. So back at home in Singapore, due to the poor soil management, you can also see that like during heavy rainstorm seasons, you get a lot of massive soil erosion and slippage. And this is one that happened in Outram. So zooming in from the urban level, in the home level, we also notice that there's so much lack of understanding of what makes good soil and compost. And coupled with the low quality commercial products due to the monopolized large industry, there is frequent plant deaths causing a lot of frustration, time, and money loss. So this is from my experience as a beginner gardener. I go through so many rounds of changing my plants just because I didn't know how to care for them in terms of watering and how much soil to put into my mix. Yeah, so how we do it is to focus on this thing called the soil food web, which refers to the microorganisms that live in the soil or have some sort of interaction with soil in their lifespan. And why this soil food web is so important is because through the metabolic processes, you know, from the animal eating the anthropods eating the nematodes and the fungi. This kind of process actually helps to break down the nutrients into a more bioavailable form for the plants. So the plants can actually get all these nutrients without the need of synthetic fertilizer. So what some of these bacteria do is also to help aggregate the soil so that there will be more aeration in the soil and hence resist the pests and diseases that thrive in anaerobic conditions. Plants like us do like a lot of oxygen as well to stay healthy. Yep. So industrialized agriculture has taught us to keep your plants healthy and happy, just add synthetic fertilizer. But this is actually very wrong because it actually kills off beneficial microorganisms. And in the long run, it actually degrades the quality of your soil. Nutrients are also leached into water bodies, and this disrupts our aquatic ecosystems. And lastly, nitrates will accumulate, and because of our addition of synthetic fertilizer, this actually accumulates nitrates, and then it can even be consumed into our body, and this is actually extremely toxic to our body. So say no to synthetic fertilizer. So our compost technology is tailored to yield compost with a diverse pool of microbes and fungi to one, boost the plant growth, and two, to prevent disease and pests from attacking these plants. From what we actually research on, it's actually a common myth that like all the plants will actually get attacked by pests and diseases. So when a plant is weak and is unhealthy, it actually sends out signals for all these pests to come attack it and take it away. So if we actually can keep the plant healthy using a good compost, it actually prevents pests and disease from happening. So how we actually do it is to use a scientifically driven production method, which includes temperature and moisture monitoring and also precise turn timings. This differentiates us from our competitors. And another way we would like to validate the efficacy of our compost is through experiments, because what really differs from your product is when it actually can help the plant grow better. And we find that this is actually lacking in the compost and fertilizer market. There are a lot of claims that are being made, but there's not much validation with, you know, even by biodigester compost and then like root stimulator, etc. So we actually get all these competitors' product and use our compost on growing plants like okra and also like leafy greens to kind of compare the efficacy. And as you can see, our competitive advantage is in the biodiversity of the microbes and fungi. So under the microscope, you can see that our compost is a lot more biodiverse as compared to our main competitors' compost. And of course, to share with you guys our long-term goal, we are not only looking at creating this compost technology. This is just a starting point. We want to create a good material so that plants can grow better and we can sequester more carbon in the ground. But from that, we want to actually develop a hardware and software to empower decentralized composting model, which I will explain to you why it's so important. And then lastly, with this good soil, you can grow a lot of nutritious food all over Singapore. Because currently the soil that is being put onto urban landscaping is just good enough for ornamental trees and shrubs to grow. But imagine what good compost can do. Growing a lot of papayas and bananas all over Singapore, that could be an possibility as well. Yep. So to share about why current composting system is not so good is because due to the hub and spoke kind of distribution, waste stream is collected all over Singapore and then sent back to be composted and then distributed back to the different sites in Singapore. So even though you can actually get a higher economies of scale, cheaper cost, but because of this large batch kind of composting, anaerobic composting usually happens, which leads to a lot of greenhouse gases, such as nitrous oxide, which is a lot worse than just ammonia and methane. And also there could be a risk of spontaneous combustion and nutrient leaching. And of course, the carbon emissions from transportation. So what a decentralized composting system can offer is that when you compost your organic materials on site, you can reduce the transportation needed for this process to happen, lowering carbon emissions. Then the output will be quality compost in different neighborhoods in Singapore, leading to fertile neighborhoods. And this is, of course, made possible because we do have a lot of good raw materials all over Singapore for us to tap on. And lastly, I would like to also share with you my team structure. So I'm accompanied by two very talented people, Jeremy Beckman, who looks into the soil microbiology. So he spends a lot of time under the microscope deciding whether or not our compost results are good. And then we have Yiping, who is in charge of designing the plant experiment and seeing if our compost outcompetes in terms of efficacy. And then I look into the business and marketing side of the business. The business development and marketing side of the business. Yeah, so today we have a few scientific inquiries, something that we have thought out that we could need some help with. So area number one is to improve the soil microbiology testing process. Why this is important is because Jeremy Beckman, he spends actually average more than 1 hour to examine one soil sample. So what is required is actually visual analysis to identify the number of nematodes, protozoa. So they actually look pretty different. So at the bottom, you can actually see these are the 5 different groups of nematodes, and they look different based on how their mouth looks like. Yeah, so and then also fungi is being have to be identified to see if they're beneficial based on the color, the sector, the thickness. And of course, the most consuming and tedious part of the process is to account for the bacteria, where Jeremy has to literally dilute the compost solution and count the number of bacteria between 30 to 120 in one field of view. So we are thinking, can we actually apply computer vision for microscopy image analysis? This is something that we're thinking to see if also ASA has similar pain points in different use cases, and maybe we can leverage on current technology in computer vision to solve this. And the next 2 areas are based on the life cycle analysis. So a good life cycle analysis is extremely important because it can actually share a lot of new insights. So for example, for this particular white oak pasture beef farm, you can actually see that it sequesters, the farm actually sequesters more carbon than it emits. So why is this so? It's because they actually have very good regenerative practices to ensure that their soil is has a lot of good microbes and organic matter. Yeah, so with a good life cycle analysis, we can actually compare the different urban agriculture system. So the system number 1 is just letting tropical vegetation regrow on the cleared land. So this is the baseline study. And of course, we want to see how a regenerative food production system can look like, with emphasis on increasing soil organic matter year to year, planting of edible crops, and also processing of organic matter on site into compost. And the last system will be our monoculture based vegetable and food production that uses synthetic fertilizer and pesticides. And the last area is if we can actually harness life cycle analysis to compare aerobic and anaerobic composting systems for landscaping and horticulture waste. System number one is used by our main competitor using very big heaps of organic matter, and this usually ends up doing a bit of thermophilic anaerobic composting that we think will actually release a lot of harmful greenhouse gases. Our system is the second system, which is thermophilic aerobic composting. So this reduces the amount of gases that goes into the atmosphere. And lastly, the third system is the incineration of waste for electricity generation. So this is something that is done in Singapore to produce energy. So we can actually compare the greenhouse gases emissions, sequestration potential of the output, and also other factors. Yeah, so we are hoping to learn more about you guys, because I know that ASA has like a department looking into life cycle analysis as well. So thank you for listening to our sharing, and yeah, we hope that you can join us to concord grid soil. So if anyone is interested, can reach out to us as well. Yeah, now I'd like to pass the time to Shenhui, who's gonna share with you about a similar topic, terraforming.
Perhaps before we go into Shen Hui's presentation, let us do a poll question. So
Yeah, sure.
I would like to invite everyone to participate in this poll. So the first question is, do you think Singapore is capable of being 100% self-sufficient in food in the event of a worst case scenario? Okay, give it a few more seconds for everyone to complete. Okay, 5 more seconds. Okay, here's the poll result. So actually majority thinks that Singapore is not capable of self-sufficient in food. Okay, let's hear what the next speaker, Shen Hui, thinks about this. Shen Hui?
Thank you, Susan, and thanks, Jeremy and Jaden. Yeah, that's quite an interesting poll result. So I guess if you guys are interested, working with Jaden to upgrade our soil would be a very good move towards achieving self-sufficiency. So let me pull up my slides. Yeah. So as explained by Jeremy earlier on in his presentation, so Terraformers is a pre-startup that came out of the climate adaptive manufacturing. So our slogan is to transform relationships with Earth, which is the only planet confirmed to host life. So our mission at Terraformers is to empower everyone to contribute towards revitalizing Earth's landscapes and biodiversity. More than 90% of Earth's land area could be degraded by 2050. And our agricultural systems, also like mentioned by Jaden, the use of synthetic fertilizers degrades land further. So right now we're just shifting our agricultural systems to where it is where it is more fertile, and we leave behind land that becomes more and more barren. So with only 10% of good land left for us as a species to get food, it's actually very critically dangerous for us. What we aim to do is to facilitate the development of more localized solutions to conserve different ecosystems globally by creating strong communities that have a stake in shaping up a friendly planet for us and all to live in. So, a suite of basic tools that can be further enhanced and adapted to create landscape and biodiversity restoration solutions will be made available to the community we form. This toolkit is put together by working with the technology providers who have specialties in enhancing ecological processes. Anyone in the community can pick up on these tools and adapt them for use. Rural dwellers will contribute by providing context to the problem and implementing the solutions. Urban dwellers contribute time and expertise to work on adapting the toolkit to become deployable solutions. So through the concerted efforts of the community we built, localized solutions that are tailored to the needs and resource availability of different landscapes and geographical locations are developed, hence creating more impact. Also, by forming urbanized communities, we are able to increase the stake urban dwellers have in restoring landscapes and biodiversity that they're not used to on a regular basis. This bridges the divide between urban and rural communities, and together we can work on resolving this humanity crisis. So right now the job of restoring ecosystems or landscapes that is not privatized or does not have economic value is left to the governments. On an individual level, it is a very distant problem to most, and hence there's a lot of indifference or lack of motivation to do anything about it unless it's provided for by the government, such as in the case of the Loess Plateau restoration in China or the Regreen Sinai Desert project in Egypt. So there's been a lot of awareness creation by specialists or activists in this field, such as the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, where they have established a knowledge hub that includes toolkits for drought. But this usually has a very academic slant and or it's more for a consultancy project. So they're not immediately usable by the commons, hence limiting the impacts of its reach. So to bridge these gaps, we want to create an environment for solutions to be developed and implemented on an individual level so that we can reduce our reliance on government to act. Also through the provision of a basic terraforming toolkit that can be further adapted into different solutions to restore landscapes and biodiversity, we ease the implementation and adoption of these solutions by local rural communities. So our vision is to be a community of harmonious earthlings that are intrinsically motivated to conserve and coexist within our ecosystem. We build up a better understanding of how ecosystems work in the process and are equipped with easily deployable solutions to create a holistically livable environment for ourselves. So for today, the collaborations, like the scientific collaborations that we are looking for are in 3 areas. So one is like in AI development, where what we intend to do is, because like through running the different small scale experiments, we are able to collect data from how different ecosystems work. So I think it's about processing this data and being able to understand better how the planet would work from there. And also technological products for both land and marine applications that would enhance ecological processes such as the water cycle or like even the mineral cycle. Also, like I think being able to measure the outcome of these small scale experiments that are conducted individually, right? We would like to work with teams that are in the field of outcome measurement, which is like carbon offset or biodiversity monitoring, so that we're able to quantify the impacts that we can create by forming this community. So this is the end of my presentation. I believe we have another poll. So Susan.
Yes, we have another poll question for everyone. Just a while. Okay, the question is, terraforming Earth is a huge challenge best left to governments and multilateral institutions. And what do you think? Okay, we are at 70% voted right now. Just give it a few more seconds. In the meantime, if let's say you have any other question for Jayden, Jeremy, or Xuanhui, feel free to post it in the Q&A box. All right, we will be closing the poll now. Okay, so we have 47% of people thinks that we should not leave it only to the governments and multilateral institutions. Good, so that everyone can play their part as well. Okay, so thanks Jeremy, Jayden, and Xuanhui for sharing. Now we will move on to the Q&A segment. So may I invite all of you to share your videos and unmute yourself.
Hello.
Jeremy, okay. So as you can see from the Q&A box, actually we have a few questions that has already been answered by Jeremy. Jeremy is from Soy Social, am I right? The technical advisor for Soy Social. So thank you, Jeremy, for answering those questions. So we have one question for Jayden. As Singapore is land scarce, many food production are looking to vertical stacking, and hydroponic sounds more potential. Would you also be doing comparison between soy and hydro farming?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So that's something that Slice and Audacity as a platform we are looking at. So something that we've identified is that actually there's a lot of investment costs required for hydroponics solutions. So we are also thinking of like, can we actually look into soy-based farming in terms of like looking at different plots of underutilized land in Singapore, where how much we can track the amount of resources that we need in terms of manpower and materials needed to kind of like do similar stuff, right? Like there's a concept in soil-based farming which is called syntropic agroforestry. So what it actually involves is like the stacking of looking at the different layers of space, and then you grow plants according to the height of it. So we can actually make use of a lot of this underutilized land. Maybe our cost of investment of like getting it up to grow, let's say, fruit trees and like calorie crops could be relatively low. And before that, I think why we believe that, of course, vertical stacking and hydroponics has its role to play, but yes, the limitation of growing calorie crops, because right now it's mostly leafy greens and herbs. We realize that, hey, even if you want to be food secure and, you know, to be food secure, especially during climate crisis, you need to have enough calories. So it takes around like 15 kg of leafy greens in order to fulfill 2000 calories. So we believe that it could be a complementary approach. So of course you have your hydroponics, maybe focusing on leafy greens for fibers and some of these macronutrients. But how about looking at a complementary approach by growing some of these calorie rich and crops all over Singapore, so that, you know, we don't waste the amount of space that we have. And it's also quite a two-pronged approach, right? We can of course grow food and actually sequester carbon with better soil management. Yeah, so this is actually an experiment that we're scoping out with the Center of Livable Cities. So they are actually quite interested in this area and hoping to write a white paper for internal policy advisory. Yeah, so this is something that we hope to do on the plot of land that you see is in Xuanhui's background. So of course we have our hydroponics farm focusing on producing high quality leafy greens, but also we have our soil-based farm that looks at how can we make use of spatial arrangement of like plants to grow productive crops that is suited for our climate especially. So that's another point. When you grow on soil and when you grow outdoors, the amount of energy and resources required is way lesser because you know, we are in a tropical climate, we have a lots of rain and sun. And naturally with soil, which is the other ingredient, we should be able to grow such crops easily.
Yeah, it's not mutually exclusive, right? You can make the best out of the soil that we have and out of the indoor farms. And we support startups in both spaces.
Yep.
And I would like to add that Audacity is not just focused on Singapore. Singapore is our test bed, but our interest is really like regional, international. And I always say that the best way to make Singapore food secure is to make sure that all our neighbors are food secure. Right? So there's plenty to go around. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks for the answers. And I have another question for Xuanhui. So why did you choose to build communities instead of directly taking on projects on landscape restoration?
Okay, yeah, I think for us, what we believe in is like the mindset where people in urban regions, right, because we're not that connected to the land, we often forget that we're actually part of the ecosystem that is actually collapsing. So it's very dangerous to have a kind of mindset where it's like, this is not really my problem because I don't see land degrading. That's our mission to form communities and include urban dwellers is really to empower everyone by involving them so that they can feel like they have ownership in Earth and they feel more empowered and motivated to act on restoring Earth. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps you could, perhaps I would like to invite Jaden and Xuanhui to share on this. So what do you mean actually by exponential agritech and exponential terraforming?
So I think the idea of exponential agri-tech is in its ability to scale. So currently our industrialized food and agri system is quite broken. And in order for us to even make a significant change and reimagine a new sustainable food future, we need to come up with exponential innovations that can disrupt economic and lifestyle changes in a rapid speed. So this can range from like this is like a range of innovations starting from like the adoption of IoT and sensors for climate control in growing systems like greenhouses and hydroponics, but it can also be innovations that help to proliferate community supported agriculture, which is like decentralized agriculture in different communities, and also like democratize growing knowledge to different communities so that we can have more food secure communities. Yeah. So in our case of soil social, what it actually means is that we hope that through the understanding of what makes better soil, we can actually unlock exponential potential in terms of production of food in a decentralized and regenerative format, the ability to sequester carbon in more places in the world, and also to restore the natural ecosystems, our environment.
Yeah, I think like what Jaden said, exponential really means like being able to amplify the impact, right, and unlocking new possibilities. So I think it's really about like shifting away from waiting for someone to do something, which is like usually the governments, but also having individuals feel like it is a relevant problem to them in the case of terraforming, and something that they can work on independently. So each individual should be able to, like in our case, we really want to empower each individual to contribute so that we can capitalize on the power of the masses to generate more momentum in terraforming. And also like our slogan is really to create that intrinsic motivation, which only comes when people are involved and people feel like it's a problem that is relevant to them. Yeah. Also, I think like what we are trying to do as the next step, it's also by building up our capabilities and knowledge base in the process, right, of getting everybody involved in terraforming, it allows us to live more holistically. And then I think it would be ideal if we reach a state where we are not terraforming just for survival, but more like to flourish with the ecosystems around us. Yeah, so
Thank you. So I guess this is where Audacity comes in, where it's a movement to bring everyone to solve a single issue together. Yeah. Okay, so we have some questions at the Q&A box. So the first question, as there is talk about mineral cycle management and precision farming, just wondering if there is any interest in portable sensors, say for monitoring plant nutrients or any mineral ions of interest? Would Jaden?
Maybe I can take that question. So I think there are currently existing portable sensors for monitoring plant nutrients and mineral ions. So that's like we have like pH monitors and also like EC, which is electrical conductivity sensors for plants. But I think if there's a wish list, it will be how to, because currently I think the understanding of what a plant need is like nutrients, good pH. But I think maybe if I could put in a wish list, it would be like a soil sensor to like track how how diverse and rich the microbes in the soil is, instead of like doing a 1 hour long analysis. Yeah, so I think that will unlock a lot more potential. Yeah, because right now we just think that it's quite a reductionist approach to think that, okay, we just need XYZ and some like this range of macronutrients in order to let a plant thrive. But from what we know about soil microbiology, is there's a lot more. Yeah, so that would be the wish list that I'll put in terms of measuring soil. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. Next question is also for Jaden. For the life cycle analysis, how will you measure or quantify the GHG emissions from various composting systems?
Okay, maybe I think maybe I missed out the previous one. Was it also let me look at the question. Hang on. Plant nutrients. Oh, maybe I think just now Jeremy Beckman, my co-founder, he has shared with me as well. There's to monitor plant how nutritious a plant is. There's this test called a Briggs test. So what people do like in overseas is like they will kind of like get a scanner at a supermarket to punch on like the leafy greens and see how much sugar level there is in the vegetable. So maybe that could be, apparently it's not really well used in locally, but I'm quite sure it's an existing technology. So I think that's another way we can track how nutritious a plant is. Yeah, so that could be another wish list, to have a sensor where we can just kind of like go to like NTUC or Prime and see, hey, how good is this vegetable? Because we only know that we produce vegetable, but how good the quality is in terms of nutrient density is still unknown. Okay, so the other question is, how would we measure and quantify the greenhouse gases? Okay, well, Jeremy Beckman wants to take this question. Yes. Can he get unmuted?
Yeah, I will unmute Jeremy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Hi, Jeremy. Jeremy Beckman.
You're on. You have to unmute yourself, Jeremy Beckman.
Hello, can you hear me?
We hear you.
Okay, yeah, so the life cycle analysis of compost making, I believe it's been done in other countries before, but we basically have to quantify all the emissions and possible sequestration points of every single process in the composting method, starting from gathering the materials, transport of the materials, composting of the materials, how much emissions are given off, and then how it's used and the effect on the soil once it's there. Because if you introduce fungi into this, can be in mycorrhizal form. So we need to quantify all of that compared to, say, anaerobic composting, which is the norm in Singapore now, where we just pile everything up in a giant pile and leave it for about 6 months. You get, as a result, you get a very, very black compost. And if you've ever dealt with it, it smells pretty bad. That smell is a result only from anaerobic composting. And methane, as you must know, that anaerobic composting gives off methane. It creates alcohol. It gives off ammonia gas. Ammonia is formula NH3, NH4, NH3 as a gas, but that's an extremely toxic greenhouse gas. Methane, 24 times the greenhouse effect, carbon equivalent, sorry. So all these things are given off during anaerobic composting, and they should be quantified in a manner and in a life cycle analysis and compared to aerobic composting, just to see and justify the need for aerobic composting compared to just piling up everything in a corner and leaving it that way. Is that clear? That's about it, I think. That makes sense?
Yeah. Since you're here, can I ask you another question from the floor? Yeah, you're always my trustworthy friend when it comes to scientific advice. Yeah, so there's a person asking whether or not we can design suitable soil that prevent mosquito breeding, because in the tropics, of course, mosquito breeding is a big problem. So I remember you mentioning to me about a natural way of dealing with pests like
Yeah, so
mosquitoes. Would you like
there's
to
a
share a bit
strain
about
of
that?
Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a bacteria. They sell it quite readily at aquarium stalls. They sell it as BT, and they have a strain specifically for mosquitoes. The soil itself does not breed mosquitoes. Compacted soil breeds mosquitoes. So if you look at NEA's recommendations, they do recommend that you break up the surface of the soil in your potted plants so that it doesn't hold water. Now, if you have to break up the soil of your potted plants, you have some horrible soil holding your potted plants. You should never ever need to break up soil using a chunkle or whatever it is. So that's the first sign that you have a problem. Healthy soil you should be able to scoop up with your hand year round, even during drought seasons, because it should be protected and should be moist. So so naturally, if you're using lots of compost and you're doing doing the basic things to take care of your soil, there shouldn't be any water logging on top to breed mosquitoes. The infiltration rate should be extremely high. To give you an idea, the best soils in America, they can infiltrate about 6 inches in about 2 minutes. Now that's about half. I think, I can't remember the figures right now. I should, but it's a significant fraction of the rainfall we get annually in Singapore. So you imagine about 1 or 2 months of rainfall falling onto Singapore soils and it being infiltrated within 2 minutes. You no longer have floods, you no longer have erosion, you wouldn't have these problems anymore. So it is quite important to take care of the soils in Singapore, to change this issue. Because PUB is apparently paying $5 to $6 million a year dredging the reservoirs and dredging the canals because of all the soil washing in. So it is a cost to our country that should be addressed. Sorry, I go off on a lot of rants.
No worries. Yeah, it's
yeah,
good.
I hope I
Yeah.
answered the question.
Yeah.
Yes, all good. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I would like to add. So the permacolony test site in Jurong, we've been given kind of like it's a pretty decent sized test site right on the gates of NTU, and it is absolutely full of mosquitoes. So if any of you wants to do any sort of proof of concept, you know, that we have anti mosquito kind of like implications, I think that's a perfect test site.
Thanks for sharing that, Jeremy. So, okay, perhaps I would like to ask Jeremy Sim. So we often get this confusion. So is Audacity a VC, accelerator, or an incubator?
Yeah, Audacity is a community center that does a little bit of incubation, a little bit of acceleration. It's a little bit of some sort of investment activity, but it is really closest to like a public swimming pool or public playground or community center. It's a private public partnership with JTC providing the kind of space and kind of like local ecosystem, and it's also providing the startup capital and international ecosystem for commercialization, right? But we should think of it as a Singapore's community center for clay-based innovation. Yeah, so come and join us. It's open to everyone. So you can come from A-Star and just kind of hang out, do some ideation. We play a lot of music. We make a lot of our own cocktails, our own alcohol. Try eating different kind of stuff. It's really quite a fun place because we understand that solving global challenges is a very it's a very heavy kind of load, right? And then the business of innovation is also very cerebral and it's very weighty. So we try to counteract that with having a lot of hilarity and levity in our lives. Yeah.
Yes, I remember when we planned for this event, and in fact, it is a series of events that's coming out next month as well. We actually plan to bring our researchers to Audacity for a site visit. Unfortunately, because of the current situation, we have to postpone that physical session. So hopefully we have the chance to actually bring our researchers there. So Okay, we have another question for Jeremy Beckman. You mentioned that composting produces certain byproducts, some toxic. Would quantifying such byproduct be useful in determining the quality of composting or stage or degree of composting?
Am I still unmuted? Yes, I am. Okay. So the general rule is that if your composting system smells, you're doing something wrong. So that's our first point of determining whether we're doing it correctly or not. The one of the famous quotes that I really go back to is that if you're smelling a farm, you're smelling mismanagement. So we don't want any smells. That's the first sign. We also don't want to see any like a white ashy formation on the inside of the compost that indicates that anaerobic anaerobic conditions are forming between 4 parts per million and 6 parts per million oxygen. And then when it goes really black, that's below 4 parts per million, and that's the standard compost we get in Singapore when it's really, really black. So that's the first sign of seeing if we're composting correctly or not. The second sign is that when we put it under the microscope, we'll see more anaerobic organisms. So we'll see like ciliates. We would see certain types of fungi that do better in low oxygen conditions. So we look out for the protozoa, and then we will look out for the certain types of bacteria that mostly disease causing that show up in these kind of conditions as well. So multisensory, we would smell it, we'll look at it without a microscope, and look at it under a microscope to see if we are doing it correctly or not. That makes sense?
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. So perhaps let's put up another poll question. This will be the last poll question that we have. So just give me a second. Okay, can human civilization be safe? What do you think?
Such a good question. I'd like to know if the scientists in the house believe that we are doomed or not so doomed.
Give you another 20 seconds. All right, we're closing it in 5 seconds. If you haven't voted, quickly. All right, so we have majority of us thinking very optimistically. So may I know what are your sensing for the panelists? What do you think? Do you think human civilization can be safe?
Yes.
Of course. One of my friends just messaged me. Oh, Shen, you want to go? What do you think, Shen? Shen is our most optimistic person. So.
Yeah, I think it can be safe. Otherwise, we wouldn't bother doing anything, right? For the three of us.
Actually, a friend who works at a VC messaged me yesterday with a quote. A sign of intelligence is the ability to hold two conflicting ideas in the same mind and still function. So I think it is possible to think that the world is doomed and yet try to do something about it. I think it's consistent. I'm probably the most pessimistic, but I really like the optimism of the audience here. And I think this is a great collaboration because it's a good chance for us to do a survey every time and get some interesting view of the scientific community in Singapore that we normally wouldn't get.
Thank you. Okay, let me check the Q&A. Okay, I have one last question for all panelists. What do you hope to achieve through the initiative you guys are doing and also from today's session? Perhaps each one of you can give a ladies first, Jaden or Shenhui?
Sure, I'm a fine lady, so I will go first. Yeah. So first of all, I think I'm very thankful for this opportunity to actually get to interact somehow. I know it's not like a normal Zoom session, but I think the audience has been very responsive in terms of asking very good and good questions, technical questions, and give us advice as well. I think what I hope to achieve down the road is more interaction with the A-Star community, because I think that it's a very nice kind of matchmaking with the people who want to kind of contribute to saving the world, and of course the people with the day-to-day expertise and scientific knowledge of how to do so. Yeah, so I look forward to interacting more with the A-Star community. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what we hope to achieve from, so like I think today's session was quite good to like hear about from the scientists, and also just putting out what kind of collaborations requests we have. So moving forward, I think it would be really like more being able to bounce more ideas with the scientific community on like what can be done, because I think after all, like we do need the practical side of science to make things happen. Yeah, and yeah, so hoping for more such sessions to go between the A-Star community and Audacity. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, right, I think one of the markers of evolutionary, for one of the markers for evolution, right, is the ability to collaborate in ever widening circles, right? So if you look at the early cavemen, could be like 1 million years ago, it would be like a single caveman or like maybe a couple or a family unit, and then we had tribes forming, after hundreds of thousands of years, and then we had city states. And it's only been like the last couple 100 years that we had nation states. And I think the world is moving even into a bigger unit than the nation state, right? So I'm very pleased and very honored to have Jaden and Xuan, who are examples of like very talented, passionate young Singaporeans who have a bigger vision, not just for themselves, but for the country and also for our neighboring countries and actually for the world. And I would like to invite anyone who's interested to come join them in their journey to build something that is maybe bigger than ourselves. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. So thank you, Jeremy, Jaden, and Xuanhui for sharing with our community today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today, as well as asking a lot of interesting questions. If you would like to connect with Audacity, you may check out their website or Facebook. Jaden has kindly put the URL in the chat box just now, so you just need to scroll up maybe. Alternatively, you can always contact us at A-Star Central, and we will do the introduction for you. Okay, with that, I'm concluding this session today, and thank you, everyone. Have a good day and take care. Stay safe.